back to the channel. Today is episode 2, part 2 of our Protocols of the Elders of Zion. Again, this is the Clemens and Blair edition, edited and translated by Thomas Dalton. The first part in this series, I did some commentary about the protocols in general, read some essays reflecting on what they contained. Today, I'm just going to read some excerpts from some of the protocols. And the next part, I'll be giving a Catholic perspective on the protocols. So we'll start with Protocol 1. In our day, the power of gold has replaced liberal rulers. There was a time when faith ruled, but today the idea of freedom cannot be realized because no one knows how to make reasonable use of it. Give the people self-government for a short time, and it will become corrupted. From that very moment, conflict emerges and soon develops into social struggles. These will eventually set the state aflame, reducing its authority to ashes. Whether the state is exhausted by internal strife, or whether civil war delivers it into the hands of its enemies, either way, the state is hopelessly lost. It is in our power. The despotism of capital, which is entirely in our hands, is the only lifeline for the state, and so it grasps it, even against its will, simply to avoid falling into an abyss. I ask, how can a sound and logical mind hope to successfully guide the masses by means of reasonable persuasion or by arguments if there is a chance of contradiction by opposing arguments, even though they are unreasonable, but which may appear more attractive to the superficially thinking masses? Guided entirely by shallow passions, superstitions, customs, traditions, and sentimental theories, the mob becomes embroiled in party dissensions that prevent all possibility of reaching an agreement, even one based on perfectly sound reasoning. Every decision of the mob depends upon an accidental or pre-arranged majority, which, owing to its ignorance of political secrets, reaches absurd decisions and thus introduces the seeds of anarchy into the government. And why I think it's crucial to read that is, if I were to read that passage to someone on the street, most people would say, I totally agree with that. And then I would say, well, did you know it comes from the horrible anti-Semitic protocols of the Elders of Zion? Well, they say, well, I can't have anything to do with that. Then you say, well, do you disagree with what was said? And they'll be confused. Because, again, the question is not where this comes from or who wrote it, but is it true? And what we're reading here is all things that we instinctively know to be true in our own time era, not what was written 120 years ago, which the protocols certainly were. Our right lies in might. In any case, the word right is an abstract idea, not amenable to proof. This word means nothing more than, give me what I want so that I can prove that I'm stronger than you. Where does right begin? Where does it end? In a state with a poorly organized government, and where the laws are weak, and where the ruler has lost his dignity thanks to liberalism, I find a new right, namely the right of might to destroy all existing order and institutions, to lay hands on the law, to alter all institutions, and to become the ruler of those who have voluntarily and liberally renounced the rights to their own power. Given the present instability of all authority, our power will be more unassailable than any other because it will be invisible until it is so well rooted that no cunning can undermine it. Out of the temporary evil to which we are now obliged, there will emerge the good of an unshakable governance that will reinstate the mechanism of a natural order that was interrupted by liberalism. The end justifies the means. Look at these beasts, steeped in alcohol, stupefied by wine. Such is the result of freedom. Surely we cannot allow our own people to come to this. The Goy Christians are stupefied by alcohol. Their youth are driven crazy by years of debauchery and vice, instigated by our agents, tutors, valets, governesses in rich houses, by clerks, and so forth, and by our women in their places of pleasure. Among the latter I include the so-called society women, their voluntary followers in vice and luxury. Our motto is power and hypocrisy. Only power can conquer in politics, especially if it is concealed in the talents that are necessary for statesmen. Violence must be the principle. Hypocrisy and cunning must be the rule of those governments that do not wish to lay down their crowns at the feet of some new power. This evil is the sole means of attaining the good. For this reason, we must not hesitate at bribery, fraud, and treason when these can help us to reach our end. In politics, it is necessary to seize the property of others without hesitation if, in so doing, we attain submission and power. Even in olden times, we shouted the words liberty, equality, and fraternity among the people. The abstract concept of liberty offered the opportunity for convincing the masses that government is nothing but a manager representing the owner of the country, namely the people, but that this manager can be discarded like a pair of worn-out gloves. The fact that the representatives of the nation can be replaced delivers them into our power and practically places their appointment in our hands. If you're led to believe that you're in charge, if you're led to believe voting is how you exercise, that's a useful fiction for those who are actually in power and actually control who becomes elected, or selected, rather. This is from protocol number 2 at the very end. Thanks to the press, we have gathered gold in our hands, though it cost us rivers of blood and tears. It cost us the sacrifice of many of our own people, but every sacrifice on our part is worth 1,000 goyim before God. And we've seen this sentiment expressed by Zionists in modern-day Israel, where they say 1,000,000 Arabs are not worth one Jewish fingernail. So this isn't some foreign concept expressed in some forgered anti-Semitic document. These are ideas that are perpetrated by Zionists in this present day and hour. And those who've heard me speak in other places, the idea that there's some great distinction between Zionism and Judaism is a false one. Zionism is derived from Judaism. The idea that they're totally separate things is false. They are related to each other, deeply related to each other. Protocol number 3. We have included rights in their constitutions, but for regular people, these are fictitious. All the so-called rights of the people exist only in the abstract and can never be realized in practice. What difference does it make to the toiling proletarian, bent double by heavy toil, oppressed by his fate, that the babblers receive the right to speech, and journalists the right to mix nonsense with reason in their writings, if the proletariat has no other benefit from the Constitution than the miserable crumbs that we throw them in return for their vote for our agents? Republican rights are bitter irony to the poor man. The necessity of almost daily labor prevents him from using them, and at the same time deprives him of his guarantee of a permanent and certain livelihood by making him dependent upon labor strikes, organized either by his masters or by his comrades. This is from Protocol 4. In theory, liberty could be harmless and remain on the state program without detriment to the well-being of the people, but only if it retained the ideas of a belief in God and human fraternity, and was freed from the conception of equality. For such an idea is contradicted by the laws of nature that establish subordination. With such a religious faith, the people would be governed by the guardians of the parish and would thrive quietly and obediently under the guidance of their spiritual leader, accepting God's dispensation on earth. It is for this reason that we must undermine faith, tearing the very principles of God and soul from the minds of the goyim, and substituting mathematical formulas and material needs. If you are appreciating this content, consider hitting like or subscribe, sharing this with other people who might find these protocols interesting. This is from Protocol 6. The aristocracy of the goyim as a political force is dead. We do not need to take it into consideration. But as landowners, they are harmful to us because they can be independent in their necessities of life. For this reason, we must deprive them of their land at any cost. To attain this object, the best method is to increase real estate taxes, the indebtedness of the land. These measures will keep land ownership in subjection. The Goy aristocracy, which as a matter of heredity are dissatisfied with small gains, will soon be ruined. I've said this in other places. In the horrible, bad, dark Middle Ages, serfs could not be kicked off their land. They could not accrue property taxes and indebtedness in the way that we can in our free democratic era, where you can owe so much in property taxes that your land can be taken from you. How is that freedom? How is that democracy? I haven't had that yet explained to me, but people like to claim, and they have no knowledge of the Middle Ages other than what they're propagandized to in their films or in their presses, which are controlled by certain people. But the Middle Ages provided many, many rights to various classes of society, bringing them up from what had been the status quo of Roman slavery and raising people up slowly and gradually through religion. Remember, religion influences the culture, and then culture influences the politics. And what we saw flowering in the Middle Ages led to these beautiful cathedrals. Who do you think built these beautiful cathedrals? Do you think the government built these cathedrals? Do you think some nonprofit foundation built these cathedrals? Do you think slave labor built these cathedrals? These cathedrals were built by free men on their own time, outside of their jobs, with their own money, because of their love of God. That is what Christendom delivered. And the testimony is there in stone for anyone who wants to see. And the history is there for anyone who wants to deny the facts. But they're there. This is from Protocol number 10. To attain this, we must force all to vote without class distinction. That is, to establish an autocracy of the majority, which cannot be obtained from the intellectual classes alone. Through this method of accustoming everyone to the idea of self-determination, we will shatter the Goy family and its educational importance. We will not allow the formation of individual minds because the mob, under our guidance, will prevent them from distinguishing themselves or even expressing themselves. The mob has become accustomed to listen only to us, who reward it for obedience and attention. We will thus create such a blind power that it will be unable to move without the guidance of our agents, sent by us to replace Goy leaders. The masses will submit to this regime because they will understand that their earnings, wages, and other benefits depend upon these agents. And I've talked about this in other places. I find it incredibly stupid that places like Australia and Singapore require everyone to vote. What this means in practice is that someone who is totally checked out of the political process, who knows nothing, has an equal power to cancel out the vote of somebody who studies, campaigns, reads deeply, and then votes. That vote can be canceled out by somebody who's just showing up because they don't want to get fined, or they don't want to have the ability of their driver's license to be stopped, to be renewed, to be stopped by having not voted. So I've said this in other places. I don't believe in the universal franchise. I don't believe that everyone should be allowed to vote. I think there should be certain rules put in place, whether that's a literacy test or whether it's the fact that you pay taxes. The idea that people who do not have to pay for measures would be involved in decisions relating to money is crazy to me. So if, for example, there is a vote on income tax or a vote on sales tax, but you're not someone who pays either of those things, why should you be allowed to vote for those things? So I very much want to put guards in place which disallow the vast majority of people who are not involved financially to vote, and to trust in the idea, remember, of people who understand that they have to take care of those who are less fortunate than they are because that's what their religion teaches them. So they may vote for things that are fiscally responsible, but that doesn't stop them from making sure that they take care of those around them. It's just not a question of a government program doing that. It's a question of individual love, individual care for your community that rises up and built. Remember, hospitals, orphanages, universities, these were all built in Christendom by the church and by people. They were not built by the government. These were all later things that the government inherited and took on and stole and arrogated to themselves. But the governments never started any of these programs. These programs were started by people who loved others, who loved knowledge, who loved taking care of people, and built institutions to do that and gave up their lives doing that. That is what love does. Love builds incredible civilizations. We have the evidence of it in history, as I said, for anyone who wants to take the time to read it. In the near future, we will make the president a responsible officer, whereupon we will have no hesitation in carrying out the things for which our dupe will be responsible. What difference does it make to us that the ranks of those aiming at authority will thin out, and that confusion will result from an instability to find real presidents? a confusion that will definitely disorganize the country. To accomplish our plan, we will engineer the election of presidents whose past record contains some hidden scandal. Then they will be faithful executors of our orders, for fear of exposure, and from a natural desire to retain the privileges, advantages, and dignity connected with the position of president. Parliaments will elect, protect, and screen presidents, but we will deprive Parliament of the right of initiating laws or of amending them, for this right will be granted by us to the responsible president, a puppet in our hands. Once again, if I were to read that to somebody on the street, they would agree. They would say, oh, yes, there's all sorts of evidence of that. And then I say, well, but do you know it comes from this anti-Semitic Jewish forgery? And then once again, they'll be confused because one thing tells them they have to oppose that. Oh, I'm totally against that. I'm not anti-Semitic. But their common sense tells them, well, everything I just heard was correct. Well, this was written more than 100 years ago. Did you know that? It was written 120 years ago. And yet it describes our present time period. How is that possible? Why is that possible? Dig deeper. This comes from Protocol number 12. The word liberty can be differently interpreted. We will define it as follows. Liberty is the right to do that which is permitted by law. Such a definition of this word will eventually serve us because liberty will be in our power, and also because the laws will either destroy or construct only what we desire, in accordance with the above-mentioned program. If we have already managed to subjugate the minds of the Goyim to such an extent that almost all of them see world events through colored glasses that we put over their eyes, if even at present there is not one state that bars our access to state secrets, so termed by the stupid Goyim, then what will it be called when we, in the person of our universal sovereign, are the acknowledged rulers of the world? Let us return to the future of the press. Anyone who wishes to become an editor, a librarian, or a printer will be obliged to obtain a certification, which in case of disobedience will be immediately revoked. With such measures, thought will become an educational tool in the hands of our government. It will not allow the people to be led astray into realms of fancy and dreams about beneficent progress. Who of us does not know that these fantastic blessings are a direct road to baseless hopes that lead to anarchistic relations between the people and the government? Do we not have cancel culture making sure that anyone who says anything against a certain state are fired from their jobs, particularly in academia? Even if there were writers who would like to attack us, they would find no publishers for their works. Before printing any work, the editor or printer will have to apply to the authorities for permission. We will then know beforehand of the attacks that are being prepared against us, and we will destroy them by coming out with advanced statements on the subject. Literature and journalism are the two most important educational forces. For this reason, our government will become the owner of most of the periodicals. This will neutralize the injurious influence of the private press and have great influence of the people. Investigate who has taken over CBS News, who's taken over TikTok, who is making sure that everything is controlled. And then they're wanting to claim there's no such thing as control of these institutions. Once again, the information is out there for anyone who's willing to take a look. From Protocol number 13. The need for daily bread silences the Goyim and compels them to remain our obedient servants. Agents taken from among them for our press will discuss only the facts they are ordered to publish when it is inconvenient for us to publish statements openly in official documents. While discussion and debate are taking place, we will simply pass the measures we desire and present them to the public as an accomplished fact. No one will dare to demand the rejection of measures thus passed, and even more, since they will be interpreted as an improvement. At this point, the press will divert the people's thoughts to new problems. We have always manipulated them via new emotions. Brainless political commentators will hasten to discuss the new problems. Such people do not understand what they are talking about. Political questions are meant to be understood only by those who have created them and have been directing them for many centuries. This is from Protocol number 14. The whole force of our principles and measures will lie in the fact that they are put forward and interpreted by us as being in sharp contrast to the decayed social order of former times. Our philosophers will discuss all the shortcomings of the Goy religion, but no one will ever discuss our religion in the light of its true aspect, and no one will ever thoroughly understand it except our own people, who will never dare to disclose its secrets. In the so-called advanced countries, we have created senseless, dirty, and disgusting literature. For a short time after our entrance into power, we will encourage its publication, so as to emphasize the contrast between it and our own lofty speeches and programs. Our wise men, trained to guide the Goyim, will prepare speeches, plans, memoranda, and articles by which we will influence their minds and direct them towards the conceptions and the knowledge that we want them to have. As Thomas Massey said, every congressman has an APAC handler who is telling that congressman what to think. And as I said in the previous episode of this series, who is in charge of Pornhub? Who is in charge of OnlyFans? Is that a coincidence, or is that something that is endemic to these plans? This is from protocol number 15. In the Goy society, where we have planted such deep roots of dissension and protest, order can only be restored by merciless measures that will serve as proof that our power cannot be infringed. You will be canceled. You will be debanked. There is no need to worry about the victims sacrificed for the future good. To attain the good, even though by the sacrifice of life, is the duty of every government that realizes that its existence depends not upon privileges alone, but also upon the exercise of its duties. We preach liberalism to the Goyim, while at the same time we hold our people and our agents under strict discipline. Through our influence, enforcement of Goy laws has been reduced to a minimum. The prestige of the law has been undermined by liberal interpretations that we have introduced. The most important questions, both political and moral, are decided by the courts in whatever manner we prescribe. The Goy administrators of justice look upon cases in whatever light we choose to expose them. We accomplish this naturally through agents that have no obvious connection to us, namely through the press or otherwise. Even senators and high officials blindly follow our advice. The Goy's purely animal mind is incapable of analysis and observation, and even less so of foreseeing the results to which a given principle may lead. It was capable to hide this back before the internet. You can't hide this sort of stuff now. We know who influences the senators. It is through the difference in the process of reasoning between us and the Goyim that it becomes possible to clearly see the stamp of God's elect, as compared to the instinctive and bestial mentality of the Goyim. They see, but they cannot foresee. They cannot invent anything except material things. It is clear, therefore, that nature herself intended us to rule and guide the world. Protocol number 16. In places of the study of the classics and ancient history, which contain more bad examples than good, we will substitute a program dealing with the future. We will obliterate from the people's memory all those historical facts that are not to our advantage, leaving only those that emphasize the mistakes of the Goy governments. The educational program will be focused on the study of practical life, of obligatory social order, of the interrelationship of human beings, of the avoidance of evil, and other questions of a pedagogical nature. We're going to take over the schools and introduce DEI and the question of how, however many genders there can be, and how the European races have only ever committed great evil. And we will make sure that we teach your children to hate themselves and their ancestors. And the best example, Exhibit A of this, is Germany. The Germans have been told to hate their ancestors through an enormous series of lies. But that's a discussion for another time. The last one I'll read from today is from protocol number 20, I think. Yes, this is protocol number 20. Last excerpts here. Indeed, what is a loan, especially a foreign loan, if not a leech? A loan is the issuance of government obligations that involve the liability to pay interest in proportion to the sum borrowed. If the loan pays 5%, then in 20 years the government has unnecessarily paid in interest an amount equal to the principal sum borrowed. In 40 years, it has paid twice. In 60 years, it has trebled the sum, while the loan still remains an unpaid debt. I can't speak for other countries, but the United States indebtedness is unimaginable. It's unimaginable. And it's in debt to a certain group of people. The purely bestial brains of the Goyim are so short-sighted. This first appeared when they borrowed money at interest. It did not occur to the Goyim that this money, with the additional interest on it, would have to be taken from the national resources and paid to us. Would it not have been simpler to take the needed money from their own people? Yes. And that mistake, that trap has been fallen into by numerous Gentiles over the centuries. And that has led to resentments and, as we can see, certain actions taken against certain peoples. But that's a discussion for another time. We'll talk about that more in episode 3 when we look at Catholic perspectives on the protocols over the years. If you'd like to thank me for this presentation, an easy and free way you can do that is by, as I alluded to earlier, hitting like, subscribe, sharing this with people who might be interested in these topics. If you'd like to thank me for this presentation, there are links to PayPal and Buy Me a Coffee if you want to send a one-time donation. If you'd like to support this work on a recurring basis and get early access to videos like this one, there's a link to Patreon and YouTube membership. You can use either platform. You get the same benefits. I give a once-a-month exclusive video to my patrons and members talking about what's on my mind, what's going on behind the scenes, what I'm thinking about. And I also answer questions that they pose. If you'd like to propose a book for the future, my Amazon wishlist is linked as well. You can search through there. You'll find books on Palestine. That's for my Palestine bookshelf project. Feel free to check that out. But if it's not on Palestine, it's for this channel. You can buy a book, send it my way, and I'll do my best to review it in a timely manner. Until the next episode in this series, and until next time, enjoy your reading.